everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here, and welcome back to the deep dive into Shadows of Brimstone. And we're continuing to take a look at Hexcrawl. And in the last episode, we took a look at how I use Hexcrawl to start setting up towns, how I use Hexcrawl to set up like a home base, how I use the orange chits here to generate stories, and how I start to populate the various towns with different NPCs to start fleshing out my sandbox style campaign. Well, let's back up and get a bigger picture for this video, and we're going to just kind of talk about what would be my final quest? What's my objective in this kind of like small campaign that I would be creating? Well, since I am playing with the Blasted Wastes expansion, I want to utilize that. So what I thought would be cool is if we have the Badlands here. Okay, we have this area in the Brimstone map called the Badlands. And some kind of really strong, bizarre, strange, dark stone void occurrence has happened here. And it's like created this post-apocalyptic area of Brimstone. And this area out here is all irradiated. And so this, mine number 4, that is going to be my final objective. So I would just take my mine tracker here and I would look for mine number 4, which is called the Badlands. And I would just right here, it's going to be in the Blasted Wastes for sure. And then also maybe just circle it so we know final objective or something like that. So just know that this is where we're trying to get to. And now what are we trying to do at that mine? Well, when I play a sandbox campaign, what I like to do is I like to just do a boss hunt and a mini boss hunt. And I talked a little bit about that when we were looking at the enemies. So in this sheet that I made that I have all of my expansions that I own, I have a list of all of my mini bosses and bosses or things that could be used as mini bosses, maybe if you play on the brutal side or something like that. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to go ahead and fight the Burrower. So I'm going to say that the Burrower is going to be my final objective for this sandbox campaign. And he is going to be residing in the Badlands in mine number 4. And so when we get to that mine, we are going to have to do This Is No Cave as our mission at mine number 4. So along the way, since the Badlands are spreading, since I'm going to have this area start spreading out, I'm also going to go ahead and elect that we play with the Blasted Wastes, the legendary enemy, that 2-pack that we saw in a previous video of those legendary named enemies. So those are going to be the 2 mini bosses. So in order to win this campaign, I need to kill both of those mini bosses, and then I would need to get to mine number 4 and defeat the Burrower. Okay, now a couple ways I could lose is that if my hometown of Seto's Mill is destroyed, and I am going to try to come up with, some kind of threat, some kind of ticking timer where I need something to light the fire under my posse's feet, if you will. So I've taken these skull markers from Dead Man Tell No Tales. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to start with one on the Badlands. And at the end of every week, so far I'm thinking a week is going to be good. I'm not quite sure about the time. So this could be something that I adjust as I play. But at the end of every week, I'm going to make a trail of these skulls leading to the closest city. Okay, and every time a skull lands on a city, that city becomes a barter town. So it's no longer a frontier town. It's no longer a frontier settlement. It has been irradiated and it has become a barter town. And then from there, I would start doing the same thing to the next city. And these irradiated guys, this irradiated land is spreading from the west to the east, and it's taking over towns. And so what I would do is I would say that another way I could lose is that if every town on the west side of Brimstone, with the folded map being my divider line or something like that, you know, if every town has fallen to become a barter town, well then that is another way that I could lose the campaign. And of course, as you're playing, this kind of stuff needs to be adjusted. I don't use Hexcrawl as like a strict set of rules. I use it as a way to help facilitate a kind of a fluid campaign, and things are constantly being adjusted as we are playing. Things are being modified, and as we start creating our story with our towns and our NPCs and connections from one mission to the next, well then maybe some things might change. So a couple things that I forgot to mention in the last video, I just wanted to go over those real quick. One is that all towns, unless stated otherwise, are assumed to have an inn and a campsite. So you don't need to worry about populating your towns with inns and campsites. Another thing that I forgot to show is assigning the missions. So we went ahead and said that Wilson's Lodge contained a certain number of jobs, and then it also contained a mission. Well, what I would do is when I assign a mission to a town that I can undertake, I just roll a d20 and I assign it to that mine. So that would be at Conrad's claim. So I didn't actually write down the mission that I assigned. I don't remember. Oh, it was one of the Forbidden Fortress missions, or the Belly of the Beast, Into the Beast, or something like Into the Belly. So I would just say that that is going to take place at mine number 18. And then we can travel to mine number 18, and that could be where our first actual mission is going to be if we decide to take that mission. Now, a town can only offer one mission at a time and 3 jobs at a time. So that mission will always be associated with Wilson's Lodge until I go to mine number 18 and I complete the mission and return. Then we can get another mission from Wilson's Lodge. So that's just a little bit more about the campaign, how I would set up a sandbox campaign. So let's go ahead and take a quick look through kind of the rest of some of the rules for Hexcrawl. So here we have some expanded combat options, which I do use in many of my games. Again, I use Hexcrawl more as a modular system to add and not add things I like or don't like, respectively. So with new attacks, you can push and pull enemies. I like to be able to push enemies into pits and that kind of thing. And also you could modify it to where the enemies could actually push you out of the way of doors. So that way we can get rid of that bottleneck strategy that plagued games like Advanced Hero Quest. You know, Dungeon Universalis, they solved that by having follow-up attacks and pushing. And it's very good. So you could modify that to be in this game as well. You can stranglehold. You can capture. Some of the missions in here now will have you capturing enemies or NPCs, and you might want to use the lasso for that. So capturing is a cool element that this added. We have taken a look at this before, but this does add overland combat to where you can print out these maps and have little skirmishes. Now this does say sometimes to combine 2 maps together, but I rarely do that, if ever. I like to keep my overland skirmishes small, tight, and fast, because it's usually done while you are traveling. So I just like to keep it kind of snappy. One thing I never do is mounted combat. I hate mounted combat in any game because it always just adds complexity, and it never, in my opinion, it never adds anything any amount of fun that is worth the complexity. So mounted combat just doesn't happen in my games. And then we get into a little more detail about your human enemies. And those are the enemies that I showed a couple episodes on my Kindle, where you have different kinds of villains and lackeys and thugs and henchmen. And so this is just a way that illustrates more on how to use those new human enemies and villains in your game. And then we get to some of the missions. So Hexcrawl does contain 6 missions, 6 new missions. And then this tells you what constitutes completing a mission in Hexcrawl. You know, you take the mission, you go on it, and you have to return. This shows you a chart where you can randomly roll for missions based on what you own, kind of like what I showed you before. You know, you can roll a D8 or a D6. You can have an extra large enemy mission, an enemy pack mission, a frontier town mission, a Hexcrawl mission from this book, or an adventure card mission of any adventure book mission. And you could draw a world card as a randomizer for that. So just different ways on how to choose the missions. Different ways. So due to how travel is altered in Hexcrawl, some of the failure results for certain missions need to be adjusted. So if there's ever a question on what constitutes a failure, then you can check this page here. And then we get into the missions that are included in this Hexcrawl book, of which we have a Hive of Scum and Villainy, Missing Expedition, Hostages, Down on the Bayou, really cool mission there, and Race Against Time, and Confrontation against a big boss type monster. This starts to go into more detail on the jobs board, which we have taken a look at, and we'll take a more detailed look when we get into that section in the book. But this tells you how to choose jobs, completing jobs, what constitutes a job completion, and then a detailed list of all the different terms and keywords and things that you will need to have defined for each job. I do things a little differently. We showed last time how when I populate a town, I populate it with the 3 jobs that are currently available. And then as I go through a job, I could populate it with a new one. It's going to tell you about your different rewards, how if you drop a job, does count as a failure, how jobs can move into missions, and how to use exploration tokens when you are on a job. And here we come to really kind of like the bulk of Hexcrawl. And I kind of wish this was towards the front of the book. I think it would make a little bit more sense. But these are the different style campaigns. So what we've been going over right now is me setting up my version of a sandbox campaign where I am in control of the objective. I am in control of the losing condition, and I can just play until one of those happens, and I can constantly be modifying it as I go. This book also contains a short story campaign, which is pretty cool. It's like a choose your own adventure where you will have choices, and within the paragraphs of that choose your own adventure, it will tell you that you have to do certain jobs. It will tell you that you have to go to certain towns or certain mines, and you will have to complete certain missions before you can progress through the story. Very cool. Hell on Earth campaign is kind of like a super hardcore campaign where just hell has already come to Brimstone and you're having to deal with it, and it's pretty deadly. The Mind Blast campaign is kind of like the Hexcrawl campaign, and I mentioned it a little bit before, but during that campaign, your goal is to either destroy or seal every mine in Brimstone. So you would have to undergo 20 main missions in order to do that. And that talks a little bit about what you need to do there, the different objectives, how you would fail. You have a tracker that is doom is coming to Brimstone, and you need to make sure that those mines are sealed quickly and efficiently. Then you have a few different campaign options here. The Maleficent 7. The posse starts off with 7 heroes, and any KO'd heroes are permanently dead if the rest of the heroes flee or are KO'd. Play until you're either dead or victorious. I like that. I like to come up with like a stable of 7 or 8 heroes that are that are living in my hometown. And as one dies, I will introduce a new one to my party, kind of like Blackstone Fortress. I really like doing that. And it also has some rules on playing with a game master, because this is very easy to turn into a full-blown RPG or a solo RPG. And then we come here into the short story campaign. And this is actually pretty cool. The writing, the prose writing in Hexcrawl is a little hit and miss. You can tell it is a little amateur, especially compared to the good, theme, the good flavor text in the regular Shadows of Brimstone game. But this is a lot of fun. It's actually pretty in-depth. It has some interesting branching choices. So you will read a paragraph, then it'll tell you what you need to do to progress the story. You do that, you will make a choice, and then you will progress to, usually one of 2 different story options as you work your way through this story campaign. So a welcome addition to the game. I have a feeling that if the frogs come up with a campaign, it will kind of be more like this rather than more like a sandbox or the Hexcrawl campaign. So as you can see, it's pretty long and it's pretty in-depth. You get involved in some pretty wild things. And so next up, we will take a more in-depth look at some of the encounters and how those work. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you are still enjoying this deep dive into Shadows of Brimstone and the Hexcrawl fan expansion. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.